Greetings, folks. This is DC Investing. I've reached financial independence, and I'm talking about topics that may help others on their pathway to financial independence. And the thing I want to talk about today is buying your freedom. And in order to do that, you've got to make some sacrifices. And the sacrifices usually are living beneath your means and also trying to earn as much as you possibly can to save and invest. And so, buying your freedom really is, kind of a serious thing. And you know, a lot of people think of their day job as slavery, and it kind of is like that. You have to go there every day. You're kind of stuck doing the same things. And me personally, I was an engineer. I guess I still am an engineer, and my work life is in kind of a little gray cube. Maybe it's a 10 by 10 cube. And often it was kind of interesting because, you could kind of look at it and think, hey, this is sort of just like a jail cell. I spend 9 hours a day in this little cell working on my computer. And sure, I could get up, go to the restroom, go to lunch. I could take a day off if I wanted to. But basically, 40 hours a week, I'm stuck in a little gray cell, and it's as if it was slavery. So if you want to get out of that life, you really have to make a determination to do that. And you've got to figure out how to live beneath your means and then save more. And I really made that a goal for myself. And I would try to figure out, how I can structure my finances so that I have as much left over as I possibly can. And I feel like I really succeeded in that. Um, One of the things I did was paid my house off early, and that gave me extra funds. We drove cars for as long as we possibly could. They still had good value in them, but then we weren't replacing them with new ones. And so I still have a minivan that was like a 2007, I think. I have a Nissan Leaf right now that was a 2013. I bought that one at 3 years old, and I'm still just driving it, going to drive it into the ground. Before that, I had a Geo Metro that I drove for like 15 years. Actually, it was my wife's car first, and then we got the minivan. I inherited the car. And let me tell you, it was not a man car from the sake of status, but I was more interested in buying my financial freedom. And I could drive that little Geo Metro with the paint getting rubbed off. And it was such a cheap car to drive every year that gave more dollars in my pocket to go to and invest. And so after about 20 years of working in my career, or maybe it was more like 15 years or something, I got it structured so that I was actually clearing about $55,000 a year that I could then use to invest. And I would save that funds. I used it first to start a business. The business then failed, and then I just started plowing it directly into stocks and other investments. So, so $55,000 a year is a pretty decent chunk of change in order to build up your finances. I would use the tax code to the best of my ability, and that 55 grand was after what I would put into my 401k, just to get the company match. And then I would choose how much do I want to put into the 401k system. If my tax bracket was higher, how much would I put in after that? And just religiously, I would save into my brokerage account. And at minimum, I would at least earn money market account rates in those funds. And then I just slowly built up that nest egg. So, that took a long time in order to kind of, my salary would continue to grow over time, but I just didn't increase my life's expenditures. Actually, they actually reduced. We bought a car and then it was done. We paid it off, bought a house. I think it took me 13 years to pay off that house. But then once that was complete, it was paid off, and I didn't have that expense anymore. So, so overall, trying to play the game of how much can you save every year. And I don't feel like we missed out on anything in life. We still took vacations. We tended to, do more things locally than we did, flying on fancy vacations to other places. We did a couple of those. Like I took my kids to Disney World one year. That was when the airline rates dropped because it was like 2008, and I think we got $99 round trip tickets to Florida from Utah. That was a great deal. So we couldn't pass up on it. So we went to Disney World, went to Disneyland. I think I took my kids to Hawaii one year. My wife and I went multiple times to Hawaii. I'd rather leave the kids home than take them in a lot of cases. So we didn't like miss out on a lot of stuff, but it was still always make sure that all of our bills were paid and that we were still saving. And year after year, the funds available to invest increased. And I was really interested in buying my freedom. Part of the reason why I wanted to do a personal business was because I wanted freedom from my engineering job, and it almost worked. I think if I had one more year free and clear, I would have had enough funds to fight the city that they came down on my business, and it was really unfair. I'm still miffed about that, but what can you do? You got to have money to fight City Hall when they are just jerks about something, and it's one of those things that happens. You kind of shift and you move someplace else, and you figure out another way to earn your financial freedom. So, overall, trying to earn as much as you can without, destroying your life, because you still have to live life. Trying to save as much as you can to then create assets that then you can use to buy your freedom. So there you go. That's part of my story. I've gotten to be able to save $55,000 or $65,000 a year. That really sped me up. And actually, I've continued on that quest, and dividends started being a bigger part of my overall finances. So as I got to be, more and more dividends would come in, that paid for all of my expenses. And so for the last 2 or 3 years, I basically saved pretty much 100% of my paycheck that I get from my engineering job. And it was so funny. One time, the the HR folks called me up once, and they said, "Hey, we think you've made a mistake. The amount that you're saving pretty much gets rid of your entire paycheck." And I said, "No, that was intentional." And they were just really surprised at it. But basically, I don't need my paycheck. And I was able to max out the 401k system for a couple of years. And that was like $74,000 a year that I would put into the 401k system between traditional contributions and Roth contributions. So, I just continued to ramp it up. And the more you save, then the more investments you have that can then pay for your lifestyle. So, there's some thoughts. Like, subscribe, just trying to give you some ideas on things that can make millionaires and give you financial freedom. So we'll see you. Bye.